December 2nd, 1993. Medellin, Colombia, 3:17 in the afternoon. A radio transmission lasting less than a minute was intercepted in a neighborhood called Los Olivos. After 15 months of hiding, Pablo Escobar had finally stayed on the line long enough. Within minutes, Colombian police units were moving toward the signal. But to understand what happened that afternoon, we need to go back to the beginning. Pablo Escobar was born in Medellin in 1949 and grew up surrounded by poverty and inequality. From an early age, he became obsessed with escaping that life. Friends remembered his confidence long before he had money. As a teenager, he was already involved in scams and street crime. Those around him noticed something unusual, a quiet certainty that he was destined for something bigger. In the early 1970s, he worked as a thief and low-level criminal. Then, around 1975, he entered the cocaine trade. At the time, cocaine trafficking was still small. Escobar saw something others didn't. He decided to build the infrastructure himself. By 1976, he had already been arrested multiple times. Each time he escaped consequences through corruption, intimidation, or violence. Detectives connected to his arrests were later murdered. The lesson was clear. In Colombia at that time, violence was often more effective than the law. Over the next several years, Escobar expanded rapidly. He created smuggling routes through Panama and the Caribbean, built transportation networks, and formed alliances with other traffickers. Escobar invested in aircraft, boats, warehouses, and protection. What began as smuggling became an industrial-scale operation that eventually supplied a huge share of the cocaine entering the United States. The money became unimaginable. At his peak, Escobar was earning hundreds of millions of dollars every week. Warehouses overflowed with cash. The scale was difficult to comprehend. Cash was stored in hideouts faster than it could be counted. Escobar later claimed that rats destroyed enormous amounts of stored money, and it barely affected the organization. By almost any measure, he had become one of the wealthiest criminals in history. Money was bundled with rubber bands, hidden underground, and stored faster than it could be counted. In the early 1980s, Escobar entered politics. He built housing projects. He funded soccer fields. He handed out money in poor neighborhoods. To many Colombians, he appeared to be a benefactor. To others, he was already one of the most dangerous criminals in the world. In 1982, he entered Colombia's legislature. He stood inside the political system he had spent years manipulating from the outside. That illusion ended quickly. Justice Minister Rodrigo Lara Bonilla publicly exposed Escobar's criminal connections. Lara Bonilla understood exactly who Escobar was becoming and publicly challenged him anyway. Soon afterward, he was assassinated. His murder shocked Colombia and convinced many people that the conflict had entered a far more dangerous phase. The message was unmistakable. Anyone who challenged Escobar could become a target. What followed was a campaign of terror unlike anything Colombia had experienced. Escobar's strategy became known as plata o plomo, silver or lead, take the bribe or take the bullet. Judges, politicians, journalists, and police officers were murdered. Teenage assassins known as sicarios carried out killings across Medellin. In 1989, violence reached a horrifying new level. A bomb destroyed Avianca Flight 203, killing everyone aboard. Weeks later, a massive truck bomb devastated Colombia's intelligence headquarters. Escobar wanted the world to know who was responsible, and the world listened. By 1990, the crisis had become international. The DEA increased its involvement. Agents Steve Murphy and Javier Peña worked alongside Colombian authorities to track the cartel. President Cesar Gaviria authorized a specialized police unit with one mission: find Pablo Escobar. The unit became known as the Search Bloc. Its commander was Colonel Hugo Martínez. Accepting the assignment meant accepting constant danger. Martínez accepted anyway. It was one of the most dangerous assignments in Colombia. Search Bloc officers became targets. Their families became targets. Martínez survived repeated threats and assassination attempts, yet continued the mission. Then came one of the strangest chapters in criminal history. Escobar surrendered, but he negotiated the terms himself. Instead of a normal prison, he was allowed to serve his sentence inside a facility called La Catedral. Escobar selected guards, controlled visitors, and maintained influence far beyond the prison walls. When authorities finally tried to move him to a real prison in 1992, he escaped. The hunt started again, this time with even greater intensity. For 16 months, the Search Bloc pursued Escobar across Medellin. Every safe house became temporary. Every alley became a risk. At the same time, another force entered the conflict. Los Pepes, a shadowy organization formed by people who had suffered under Escobar's violence. They targeted his associates, destroyed his properties, and dismantled his support network piece by piece. Officially, many questions remained unanswered. Unofficially, the pressure on Escobar was becoming unbearable. The empire that once protected him was collapsing. He moved constantly, rarely stayed in one place. Communicated only through short radio and phone transmissions. He understood surveillance, he understood risk, but he remained a father, and that became his weakness. With American technical assistance, the Search Bloc developed advanced signal tracking capabilities. Whenever Escobar transmitted, technicians attempted to locate him before he disconnected. Usually, he ended calls before they could succeed. On December 2, 1993, he stayed on the line too long. The signal locked. The location resolved. A single house. A single street. Los Olivos. The convoy moved. Search Bloc officers surrounded the property. The operation unfolded quickly. A bodyguard was killed during the initial confrontation. Inside, Escobar moved through the house searching for a way out. He climbed through a window, onto the rooftop. For years, rooftops had been escape routes. This time, there was nowhere left to go. Officers closed in. Gunfire erupted. And moments later, the hunt ended. Pablo Escobar was dead. He was 44 years old. Less than 5 miles from where his story had begun, news spread around the world almost immediately. Some Colombians celebrated. Others mourned. In the neighborhoods where Escobar had built homes and funded community projects, many saw him as a protector. In other parts of the country, he was remembered for bombings, murders, and fear. Steve Murphy and Javier Peña stood inside the safe house and witnessed the end of a man who had shaped an entire era. Colonel Hugo Martínez, after years of threats, assassinations, and sacrifice, finally saw the mission completed. There was little left to say. The hunt was over. But Colombia's problems did not end there. Other cartels emerged. Drug trafficking evolved. The conflict continued. Pablo Escobar understood money. He understood fear. He understood loyalty, betrayal, and power. He was brought down by people who simply refused to stop looking. And on a rooftop in Los Olivos, after years of violence and bloodshed, the hunt finally ended. In Medellin, the city that created Pablo Escobar and the city that buried him.